G'day, welcome to A Farrier's Life. This is the hoof anatomy series of videos, and in this video we're going to be looking at a young thoroughbred cadavers, a front foot and a back foot. It's really important to study, you know, in whatever way you can, through books, through videos, directly with farriers and living horses, in this case as well with deceased horses. This gives us a chance to look really deeply inside the anatomy of a horse and get a really different perspective and understanding on what is going on inside these limbs and these structures. You know, the reason being is so that we can care for these animals whilst they're alive. You know, we want our animals, the animals in our lives, to perform really well, to be as healthy and to have a life of the highest quality that we can provide. So it's our job as farriers, as vets, as horse owners, as anyone who has a life and relationship with domestic animals. It's very important, so let's get into it. So a quick overview. These are the tools we're going to be using: picks, wire brush, nippers, hoof knives. We've got some steel ruler, a couple of those, some marker pens, a rasp, obviously the two cadavers that we're going to be working on, and a bucket of iodine for me to wash my hands with. I go through this like the clappers, you know, for washing the bottom of horses' feet. And what are we going to cover in this video? Well, I've already said we're going to be working on a young thoroughbred horse and the importance of learning, studying, so that we can better care for the animals within our care. I'm going to go over my initial observations. We're going to hoof map these hooves. We're going to do a basic maintenance trim. I'm going to talk about the importance of regular hoof care, the importance of hygiene, the consequences of neglecting these things, and what we can do when we do come across problems. So yeah, as it says, let's get in. So my initial observations, obviously I didn't know these horses when it was alive, but I've been given a hind foot. This is a hind foot, this is a front foot, and what you'll notice is a much more of a rounded shape to front feet. We have this wider rounded foot. That one's there's a front foot. This one's a hind foot. You can see it's much narrower and more pointy. It's wide here and then it tapers off into a more of a point there. The frogs. This is the frog, and you know, it's reasonably healthy. Here in New Zealand we're very wet climate, so the frogs deteriorate and get all kinds of infections. They get necrotic and they rot very easily. Very important to try and keep the frogs' hygiene up and to clear these collateral grooves down the side so they don't trap mud and moisture and develop fungal and bacterial infections. So I'll start with the front foot. As you can see, there's some length in the hoof wall around here beyond the level of the sole. So we've got the sole tissue here, and we've got the hoof wall which surrounds the entire foot. We've got plenty of length. We've got the bars here slightly overgrown. But what you'll notice, the first thing I really notice, is this split in the toe. If I turn it over, you can see the split in the toe just there. So a hoof grows from this coronary band, this hairline. It grows from here and then it works its way down here over the course of about 6 months, a year. So from this hoof here will be down here in 6 months' time, exactly the same as your fingernail. Your fingernail grows at the cuticle up by the top there, and it moves down towards the end, and then it's either worn off or it's trimmed off. So we've got this length. I do notice that this side's steep and this side's bending away this way. You can see this is a steep gradient and this is kicking out this way, and you've got these growth bands which are very common, especially in younger horses. When everything's developing inside, it has these distortions on the outside, but definitely from this growth band here down, there's a big distortion heading out this way. So the hind foot, relatively healthy. Again, the same amount of excessive hoof growth. Again, we live in a wet climate here in New Zealand. These horses are kept on grassy paddocks. They don't have the ability to walk over abrasive terrain. They're not able to wear their hoof off themselves. So that's the primary reason why we need to come and take this hoof, this length off. Because as you can see, like the front foot, we've got this hoof growing down towards the ground like this. When it gets long and when the hoof tissue is soft, it's got an ability to bend. And this side of the foot's obviously wanting to bend this way, this side of the foot's wanting to bend that way. And the longer and longer it gets, the more it bends. And what's happening? Same thing's happening in this foot. We've got a split here, which is forming as the two sides of the hoof all want to open up as the horse moves. And it's got debris inside there. I've cleaned these feet up real well, but I left all of the dirt and debris inside, and it's forming a hole here. So we've got a split in the toe on this one again. And as you can see, this is actually going a fair way up. This is about a third, getting on towards half of the way up the foot, and that's just what we can see. Who knows what we're going to find when we start to open this up and clean it up. Same again, this side slightly steep, this side slightly angled. And that's a very common feature and a very in hind feet. So there we have it. There's my initial observations. So when we start learning about how to trim a horse's foot, we clean the foot up, we get the foot dry, and before we do anything, before we trim, we're wanting to sort of make some marks on the foot to identify sort of where things are right now. This gives us a guide and it helps us balance the foot up. Sometimes we've got a heel way forwards, sometimes we've got one way back. One can be worn and one can be overgrown. You know, it basically gives us an opportunity to identify any distortions, any imbalances, so that it gives us a guide to work on when it comes to trim, so we can trim it back to more of a balanced structure. So, you know, when we look down the foot like this, when we pick a horse's foot up, due to conformation, due to the way the horse wears its foot, we can end up with one side of the foot being elevated up like this, or vice versa, or the same going that way. We can end up with the toe growing and the heels crushing, and vice versa, heels growing really long and the toe getting really short. So we need to identify all those things. And immediately on this foot we can see there's a lot of growth in the toe and the heels are more worn than the front foot. So there's an imbalance there. And the more and more this hoof grows, the more it accentuates this imbalance. And the imbalance is due to conformation deviations within the rest of the horse's bones and limbs up the leg. So it's not something we can change forever. We've got to manage it, but it is something that if we don't continuously balance it out, then these hoof distortions accentuate all these natural deviations within the horse's limb and can put extra strain on all the joints, leading to lameness and soreness. So we'll just get our marker pen. We want to mark where our heels are at the moment. This is called the central sulcus in here. We've got the tip of the frog here. We've got the white line. It's called the white line, but it's the junction between the sole and the hoof wall. It's the connective tissue between your fingernail and your finger, so to speak. And we've got these are the bars that running down here. This one's ending here, this one's going a bit further to there. We've got the where the bars terminate and the junction between the collateral groove and the heels there. So that gives us a few reference points. I'm gonna now we'll just make this thicker through here, and this is a maintenance trim, so we're wanting to maintain this foot. We're obviously wanting to improve this crack. We don't want this crack to continue, so I'll just get some tools ready and we'll start trimming this foot up. So I like to clean the side of this frogs here. Soon realize how difficult it is to trim a horse that isn't a leg that's not connected to the rest of the horse. Let's give these a good clean. Again, here in New Zealand the tissue is a lot softer and the frogs are a lot more deteriorated than other parts of the world, so you might see other videos where they'll carve this nice and smooth and it looks beautifully clean and healthy. Well, they're trimming horses in a very dry environment. Here we have to be careful how far we go with the frog, because we can easily draw blood and the tissue is not as calloused and as well developed. So then I like to smooth these bars out. Notice how this tissue is quite flaky and chalky. That's because it is damp and full of thrush. I'll just trim this bar up. Now it's been sat out drying, it's actually a lot harder than most of the horses' feet that I trim on a daily basis. So got those bars cleaned up and the seat of corn. And for this horse, that's about it. I'll give it a brush off. And we'll move on to the nippers. So we get a pair of nippers like this. And we're wanting to stay above that little black line that we've created. Nip off. Keeping the nippers flat. We don't want to angle them too much. We don't want to angle them back too much. We want to keep them as flat as we can for now. Move around the foot like that, taking all that excess length off. There we go. So the next part in the mapping process is we'll draw a line right the way through the center of the foot. We'll draw a line across the widest part of the foot. Seems to be about there. Again, we'll highlight the tip of the frog a bit more where the bars end. And what we can do here is we can sort of, where the heels terminate, we can get a measure on the back portion of the foot, like 4 centimeters there, and the front part of the foot about 4.5 centimeters there. So that's good. We've got a reasonably even proportions. We've got a reasonably even proportions in the front and the back. And also draw from the junction here, the junction between the heel and the collateral groove. We draw a line straight through the foot there. Same on this side. And Fantastic. Then we can draw a line from that point to that point. And this is the important one, because this gives us our breakover. This gives us a guide to where we trim the front toe section of the hoof back. The reason we do this is to stop this split getting bigger. It also puts a roll on the front of the toe in a more natural setting, or a setting where a horse is walking on abrasive ground. They'd roll their toe off themselves, they'd wear it down, which obviously this horse wasn't able to do. So we'll trim that off. We'll trim it off at a slightly steeper angle, just like that. So you can see it almost becomes a little bit like the front of your walking shoe. So we're creating what's called a breakover, and instantly you can see there's the crack. There's the crack, but it's much less severe than it was. There's a basic map on this foot. All we've got to do now is use the rasp to roll and tidy these things up and finish the foot off a little bit. So the angle that we rasp this breakover, if we put 2 fingers at the back of the foot, we can kind of create a nice even breakover there. So roughly, and what we're doing is we're just bringing that hoof wall back to that breakover line that we did. Sometimes it's not always possible if there's a lot of distortion, but on a foot like this, we can go all that way. And then on the rest of the foot, we're smoothing things off, bringing our heels back. Like that. Take the sharp edges off around the sides. And we're checking our medial lateral balance. You can see that this heel is much higher than this heel, so we've got to reduce this even further. Tidy up this bar a little bit more. Same here. Bit more of the flaky tissue around the sole. And we check our balances again. Still a fraction higher on this side, so I'm not afraid to go a bit more. Excellent. There we have it, a basic maintenance trim, and you can see we've left a little bit of hoof wall and support around the outside. We've not trimmed it flush with the sole, so this will give this horse a little bit of extra length to walk on. In terms of the front, there's very little we need to do with the front, you know. We don't need to rasp all this flat. This is going to grow down. As long as we take the length off from the bottom, all this is going to grow well attached to the coffin bone. And we shouldn't have any troubles there. You know, in the future there might be a reason to do that, but not so much today. So that covers what's involved in a basic maintenance trim, and like I say, it's important to provide regular hoof care, because these horses they're not wearing their hooves off themselves, so it gets overgrown, and remember, it bends and splits and creates these splits here. The trouble is with these splits, they then get dirt and debris caught in them. They become an anaerobic environment. Bacteria and fungus start to create an infection, and deeper within the foot where the sensitive tissue is around the bone and all of the other sensitive tissues, it gets infected, swells up, creates an abscess, and you end up with severe lameness, in a situation where you can start to push the hoof wall away from the bone, all kinds of damage. So it's really important to keep that length off. It's also really important to keep the foot clean and dry and to pick it out as best possible, as much as possible. This tissue has got to support an entire horse. The weight of a horse bearing down on 4 feet like this, it's not a great big area. If this tissue's soft and tender, your horse is not going to be able to perform very well and go very far, do the things you want them to do. So we've got to pick them out, keep them dry. We use a hoof pick obviously to clean out initially, then get a wire brush and really scrub this foot as much as possible. Try to exfoliate as much dead tissue between trims, between the farrier's visit, and that will really help you out. And then if you do that first and they're stood with them nice and clean, then the air gets in there and that will do a lot of goodness as well. So beyond that, it's a spray, something like iodine, something even stronger like formalin is what we would use to treat and prevent sort of foot rot issues. Yeah, in future videos we're going to dig these right out and do a bit more of an in-depth video on seedy toe and these types of cracks and how to treat them, but we'll leave it at that for now with this particular foot, and we'll move on to the hind foot. So with this hind foot, I'll just crack on. I won't talk, and I'll get this foot trimmed up just as I would if I was out in the paddock. One thing I will say is I don't map the foot like this anymore. My eye's tuned in. I know what I need to do. I know where to create the breakover. But I'll just give you a bit of a visual with that marker there. bit more on that heel. So that's the way. Basic maintenance trim. There's very little conformation or deviations or distortions in this particular hoof. Obviously the crack in the toe is a big problem. You know, if we were dealing with a normal horse, we'd be cleaning this out really thoroughly, would be exposing this crack, and we'd be treating it so that and it goes to there. You can already see it's gone from being that long to that long. We've taken all the pressure off this hoof, so it's not going to split. We want to stop it from travelling above and beyond that point. If we can treat it without cutting it out, without creating, scalloping all this out and exposing it, that'd be great. But you know, if this horse wasn't going to be trimmed again for a long while, I'd definitely cut this out so that it can be treated with some kind of antiseptic so it doesn't spread. But yeah, the main thing is to keep the leverage off, the length from growing, so it doesn't split in the first place. So basic maintenance trim on the hind foot, and that pretty much concludes the videos on this young thoroughbred. Obviously this thoroughbred was neglected for one reason or another, which is why we have these cracks form in the first place. Thanks for watching. So this is the hind foot of a young thoroughbred. We'll just map it now that it's had its maintenance trim. We'll first put a line straight down the centre from the central sulcus through the tip of the frog to the front of the foot. And then we've got to get our widest point. You can do this by sort of using your fingers to sort of feel out that widest point, which is about there. Draw a line across there like that. And we want to draw a line straight through the white line. This is the white line there. Draw a line straight across the toe in that direction. Then from where the heels terminate and join to the bulb, then we, from that point to where we meet this line at the white line, draw a line straight down there. Same on this side. Got a line at the tip of the frog, central sulcus. Let's put where our heels terminate. There we have it. So again, we map a horse's foot to give us an idea and to train our eye to see imbalances and deviations. It gives us a guide, a rough guide on where to trim. It gives us, you know, are our heels the same height before and after we've trimmed? Have we left enough hoof wall proud of the sole to offer a little bit of support from this point here, that what we call the pillar, the junction between the toe and the quarters? Have we left enough hoof wall proud of the sole to offer this horse a little bit of support, or have we trimmed it as flush with the sole and reduced that hoof wall right down to that level? Have we brought our break, can we, and have we brought our breakover back to the point where to the white line, to where the hoof wall meets the sole? You know, is one side of the foot slightly wider, you know. Some horses have a wider branch on one side of their foot and one side's narrower. So by putting these marks on here, we can see, oh look, that side's got a conformation sort of deviation, distortion. This side's wider, that's the way it is. Are we contracted? Are we wide? All these different things we can do, and just by mapping the foot like this, we can get a better visual on the situation at hand. And every single foot is different, and I'm not showing you this to say, right, we've got to trim to these points, to this point, exactly true. We've got to work with each individual foot, and like I say, this gives us an idea and a guideline, and it helps train our eye to see the anatomical differences that we're presented with on each foot. So there we have it. We're balanced. This one's ready to go.